Basically, me, Mark, just a regular software developer. My life isn't a movie, I just write code, collect a paycheck, and try to have a quiet life. Work at a mid-sized tech company, the kind that's successful enough to be stable but not big enough to be soulless. Or, so I thought. The team I'm on is solid, about 20 of us in the main engineering department, mostly guys. Good people, zero drama. We just get the work done. The atmosphere was always the best part of the job. We could joke around, talk about hobbies, help each other out with a tough piece of code. Nobody was walking on eggshells. The glue of our department was this guy, Gary. He's a senior engineer, probably in his late 50s. Been with the company since it was just 5 people in a garage. Knows the legacy code like the back of his hand. Gary's from a different era. He tells dad jokes, calls everyone chief or champ, and has a story for every situation. The kind of guy who would bring in donuts for no reason. He wasn't malicious, not an ounce of it in him. Just an old-school, good-natured dude. Then there's Dave. Dave is the opposite of Gary. Super quiet, keeps to himself. He's one of our best back-end guys. When you have a problem that seems impossible, you go to Dave. He'll just stare at the screen for 5 minutes straight, not saying a word, and then type out 3 lines of code that fixes everything. He never says much in meetings, but you can tell he's listening to every single word, a real observer. Our department director was this typical middle management type. Not a bad guy, just allergic to confrontation. His philosophy was simple. If the project is on schedule and the clients are happy, he doesn't care what we do. It was a good system. We had autonomy, and he had peace. For years it was like that. A well-oiled machine. We built good software. We respected each other. And the work was genuinely enjoyable. Then, a few months back, we got the email. The subject line was something like, welcoming our new head of people and culture. My first thought was, since when do we have a head of people and culture? We just had an HR lady who handled payroll. Her name was Jessica. The email had her picture. She had that very specific modern corporate look. Sharp haircut, serious expression, a bio filled with buzzwords. Passionate about fostering inclusive ecosystems, and driving systemic change through empathetic leadership. A few of us exchanged looks across the office, a collective quiet groan. We figured it would just mean more boring mandatory presentations once a year. We were so naive. Her first day, she scheduled a meet and greet with our department. She walked in, and the whole vibe of the room changed. She wasn't warm or friendly. She looked around the room like a scientist studying a new, potentially dangerous species. She introduced herself and talked for 15 minutes straight about her vision for the company's culture. It was a waterfall of corporate jargon. We needed to interrogate our privileges, decolonize our thinking, and create psychological safety. I just wanted to get back to my code. At the end, she asked if anyone had questions. Gary, trying to be friendly, raised his hand. He asked her what her favorite programming language was, a classic icebreaker for tech people. She just stared at him. A long, awkward silence. Then she said that the very question assumed a tech-normative perspective and excluded non-technical staff. Gary just blinked, confused. He mumbled an apology. That was our first taste of what was to come. The next week, the changes started. First, a company-wide mandate to add our pronouns to our email signatures. Fine, whatever. Click a button in the settings, takes 2 seconds. Most of us didn't care. But it was the way the email was worded. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a demand framed as the bare minimum of human decency. It implied that if you forgot or didn't do it, you were a bad person. Then came the posters. One morning, we walked in and the walls were covered in them, brightly colored posters with passive-aggressive messages. Is that a fact or just your opinion? Think before you speak. Is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind? Let's not, well, actually each other. They were everywhere. By the coffee machine, in the break room, even inside the bathroom stalls. It felt like being in a kindergarten classroom for adults who couldn't be trusted to behave. The easygoing chatter in the office started to die down. People became hesitant to joke around, afraid that something they said might be misinterpreted. The background hum of conversation was replaced by the sound of keyboards and a tense silence. Jessica started doing culture walks. She would just stroll through our department, not talking to anyone, just watching, listening. You could feel her presence. It was like a constant low-level audit of our personalities. One afternoon, a few of us were discussing a movie we'd seen over the weekend. She walked by and paused. She then interjected, asking if we had considered the problematic tropes presented in the film. We all just kind of stared at her, unsure how to respond. The conversation died instantly. She gave a satisfied little nod and walked away. It was becoming clear that her job wasn't to support us. It was to correct us. She implemented a new, anonymous feedback portal. The email announcing it said it was a tool to safely report microaggressions and non-inclusive behaviors. Suddenly, we were all suspects in a crime we didn't know we were committing. The camaraderie that had defined our team was being systematically dismantled. We started communicating more over chat, even with the guy sitting next to us, just to avoid being overheard. Our director did nothing. He was terrified of her. Whenever she implemented a new policy, he would just forward the email with a note saying, "Team, please see below. Let's all be sure to comply." He just wanted to stay out of her line of fire. The tension kept building for about a month. The office felt less like a workplace and more like a library during finals week. Everyone was on edge. The breaking point came during a project planning meeting. We were up against a tight deadline for a major client. The pressure was on. The meeting had been going for 2 hours. We were all tired and a bit stressed, mapping out the final phases of the project. We were deep in a technical discussion about database optimization. The director was there, along with Jessica, who now attended all department meetings to ensure cultural alignment. Gary was at the whiteboard, explaining a complex problem. He was trying to illustrate how a small error could cascade into a huge system failure. To make his point, he used a simple analogy. He said, "It's like my wife asking me to get one thing from the grocery store. If I forget that one thing, the whole dinner is ruined, and I'm in the doghouse." It was a classic harmless boomer joke, a bit dated maybe, but that's it. A couple of people in the room let out a tired chuckle, a moment of levity in a stressful meeting. But Jessica didn't chuckle. She just sat there, her expression turning to stone. She didn't say a word. She just stared at Gary with this look of intense disapproval. The smiles vanished from everyone's faces. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Gary noticed her stare. He faltered for a second, the marker hovering over the whiteboard. He seemed confused, like he didn't understand what he'd done wrong. He tried to get the meeting back on track, but the mood was ruined. The creative flow was gone. We wrapped up the meeting a few minutes later in awkward silence. As we were filing out, Jessica asked Gary to stay behind for a moment. The rest of us walked back to our desks, not saying anything, but all thinking the same thing. This was not going to be good. We saw Gary walk back to his desk about 10 minutes later. He looked pale and shaken. He sat down, stared at his monitor without typing, and then just packed up his bag and left for the day without a word to anyone. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look defeated. The next morning, the email landed in our inboxes. It was from Jessica. The subject, mandatory workshop, accountability in the modern workplace. The email was addressed only to the male employees of the engineering department, every single one of us. My stomach sank as I read it. The email was a masterpiece of corporate speak and veiled accusations. It talked about a recent incident that had highlighted the urgent need for re-education on workplace dynamics. It mentioned harmful stereotypes and the perpetuation of patriarchal narratives. It never mentioned Gary by name, but we all knew what it was about. The email concluded by stating that a mandatory 3-day workshop would be held the following week for all male staff. Attendance was not optional. It was a punishment, a public shaming disguised as a corporate training event. The entire department was furious. Guys were standing up from their desks, walking over to talk to each other in hushed, angry tones. The idea that we were all being punished for one harmless joke was insane. It was collective punishment. We were being treated like a gang of misbehaving children. A few of the more senior guys went to talk to our director. They tried to reason with him. They explained that this was a massive overreaction and would destroy the team's morale. They said Gary was a good man, and this was completely unfair to him and to all of us. The director just wrung his hands. He said it was out of his control. He claimed Jessica had escalated the issue to upper management and that this workshop was now a company-level initiative. He told us to just go along with it, get it over with, and then we could all move on. It was the most cowardly thing I'd ever seen. He wasn't our leader. He was just another employee scared of HR. We walked back to our desks feeling completely powerless. The injustice of it was infuriating. We worked hard. We did good work. We respected our colleagues. And now, we were being herded into a mandatory re-education camp because an old man told a harmless joke about his wife. The day before the workshop, Jessica sent out a pre-reading packet. It was a collection of articles with titles like Deconstructing Your Toxic Masculinity and Why Male Privilege Hurts Everyone. There was also a schedule for the workshop. Day 1 was titled Session of Acknowledgement and Apology. The description said it would be a safe space for male employees to confront their complicity in systemic oppression and apologize for past behaviors, both conscious and unconscious. We were literally being forced to attend an apology session. An apology for what? For a joke we didn't even tell? For being men? The mood in the office was grim. The productive energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, simmering resentment. That night, the private team chat, the one with just the guys, was on fire. Everyone was venting. Some guys talked about quitting. Others talked about just not showing up and daring the company to fire all 20 of us. One guy suggested we should go and just argue with every single point, completely derail the whole thing. But we all knew that any form of open rebellion would just be used against us. They would fire the ringleaders and paint us all as aggressive and unwilling to learn. It would be career suicide. We'd be labeled as problems, and it would follow us. We were trapped. There seemed to be no way out. We either submit to the humiliation, or we lose our jobs. Then, around 10 p.m., a message popped up in the chat. It was from Dave, the quiet guy. He hadn't said a word all evening, just listening to everyone else. His message was short. There's another way. Don't fight them. Don't argue. Just don't be there. Read the Employee Handbook, Section 4, B, subsection 3. A few of us immediately opened the Digital Employee Handbook. We scrolled to the section he mentioned. It was the policy on sick leave, and subsection 3 was very specific. It outlined the procedure for taking unplanned sick leave due to acute stress, anxiety, or a hostile work environment. It stated that an employee could take up to 3 consecutive days off for mental health reasons without needing a doctor's note, as long as they notified their manager and HR before the start of the workday. A hostile work environment, acute stress and anxiety. The policy was literally giving us the perfect excuse. Her own weaponized language was the key. The chat went silent for a full minute as everyone read and understood the implication. Dave sent another message. She created a hostile environment. We are all feeling acute stress and anxiety over this mandatory re-education. We would not be lying. We are simply following company policy to the letter. It was brilliant. It was completely unassailable. We weren't protesting. We weren't being insubordinate. We were simply utilizing the company's own wellness policies to take care of our mental health. The beauty of it was that they couldn't punish us for it. Punishing employees for using the official mental health sick leave policy, that would be a legal nightmare for the company. The plan formed almost instantly. It was simple, elegant, and devastating. The next morning, on the first day of the workshop, every single male engineer in the department was going to call in sick. All 20 of us. Dave laid out the final details. Everyone was to send their sick leave email between 8 and 8:15 a.m. The email should be sent to both our director and to Jessica's HR inbox. The wording should be simple and professional, citing the exact policy from the handbook. Something like, I will be taking sick leave today due to stress, as per policy 4B3. No emotion, no anger, just a cold, factual execution of company policy. We all agreed. There was a sense of excitement and solidarity in the chat that I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since this whole mess started, we didn't feel powerless. We had a plan. We were going to use the system they created to peacefully and quietly dismantle their ridiculous crusade. We weren't going to argue or shout. We were just going to disappear. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face for the first time in a long time. The next morning was going to be very, very interesting. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. There was this weird energy in the air, like the calm before a storm. I wasn't tired or groggy. I felt alert, focused. I made some coffee and sat at my kitchen table, just watching the clock. My phone was next to me, open to our private group chat. It was silent. We all knew what we had to do. There was no need for last-minute chatter. It felt like one of those scenes in a heist movie, where everyone has their role and they're all synchronized. At 7:59 a.m., I opened my email client. I had the draft ready. I'd written it the night before. It was simple, dry, and professional. 2. Director's name, Jessica's name, subject, sick leave. I am writing to inform you that I will be taking sick leave today, and for the subsequent 2 days, due to acute work-related stress. This is in accordance with the Employee Handbook, Section 4B, Subsection 3. I will monitor my email for any urgent matters. It was perfect. It was polite, it quoted policy, and it gave her no ammunition. The clock ticked over to 8 a.m. I hit send. A strange feeling of relief washed over me. It was done. My part in the silent protest was complete. I put my phone on silent and put it face down on the table. I didn't want to see the replies. Not yet. I decided to just enjoy the quiet morning. I made breakfast. The sun was coming through the window. It was peaceful. A stark contrast to the absolute chaos I knew was about to unfold at the office. We pieced together what happened next from various sources, mostly from one of the junior project managers, a woman who was friendly with us and thought the whole situation was ridiculous. She gave us the play-by-play later. Apparently, Jessica arrived at the office early that day. She was in a great mood, full of purpose. She went to the main conference room, the one reserved for her workshop. She had a box of materials with her, workbooks, markers, a stack of papers with privilege bingo printed on them. She spent a good 20 minutes setting everything up. She arranged the chairs in a circle to facilitate open and vulnerable sharing. She put a flip chart at the front of the room and wrote, "Our Journey to Accountability" at the top in big, cheerful letters. She was ready. She was about to perform the most important work of her career, fixing the broken men of the engineering department. 8:30 a.m. rolled around. The workshop was supposed to start. The room was empty. At first, she probably thought people were just running late. Engineers are sometimes not the most punctual. She stood at the door, peering down the hallway. Still nothing. She checked her watch. 8:35 a.m. A little flicker of annoyance. How dare they be late for their own mandatory re-education? She walked back to the head of the conference table, pulled out her laptop, and decided to check her email, probably to see if our director had sent a reminder to the team. And that's when she saw it. The first email, then the second, then the fifth. Her inbox was a flood. One after another, all with the same subject line. Sick leave, from me, from Dave, from Gary, from every single male engineer. She clicked on one, read it, then another. It was almost identical, and another, the same. The same dry, professional tone, the same reference to Section 4B, Subsection 3. The story goes that she just sat there, staring at the screen, her face getting paler and paler. Her cheerful, self-righteous mood evaporated, replaced by cold, dawning horror. This wasn't a coincidence. This was organized. This was a mutiny. Her first reaction wasn't to question her own actions. It was pure rage. She saw it as a personal attack, a coordinated campaign of masculine aggression designed to undermine her authority. She grabbed her laptop and stormed out of the empty conference room, heading straight for our director's office. She didn't knock, she just burst in. Our director was on the phone, and he looked stressed. He held up a finger, signaling for her to wait, but she was having none of it. She slammed her laptop down on his desk. "They're not coming," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "All of them. They've all conspired to defy a mandatory company directive." The director finished his call, his face grim. "I know, Jessica. I've been on the phone with the client." He looked exhausted. He had aged 10 years in the last hour. Today was the deadline for the beta delivery of the Phoenix project. The entire team responsible for the final integration is out with stress. Jessica just stared at him, not understanding. You need to do something. This is insubordination. We should write them all up. We should begin termination procedures for the ringleaders. The director let out a hollow laugh. Termination procedures? Jessica, we can't. They all cited the company's mental health policy. The one you championed in your first month here, they all followed the procedure perfectly. If we so much as send them a disciplinary email, we'll have a massive lawsuit on our hands for retaliating against employees for using approved sick leave. Her righteous anger began to falter, replaced by confusion. She was caught in her own trap. She had created the rules that were now being used against her. But this is a hostile act, she stammered. It's a clear demonstration of their toxic refusal to engage. The client doesn't care about toxic masculinity, Jessica, the director snapped, his fear finally boiling over into anger. They care about the multi-million-dollar contract we're about to lose because my entire department has vanished. His phone rang again. He looked at the caller ID and his face went white. It was the regional vice president, the big boss from corporate headquarters. The director picked up the phone, his hand trembling. Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, the entire team. I am looking into it right now. I know how important this deadline is. Jessica just stood there, watching her perfect world crumble. The reality of the business was colliding with her ideological bubble, and the bubble was bursting. She had thought her authority came from her moral righteousness. She was quickly learning that in the corporate world, real authority comes from the people who can deliver a project on time, and she had just managed to make all of those people disappear. Meanwhile, I was at home, enjoying a second cup of coffee. I had turned my phone back on. The group chat was cautiously optimistic. We were all checking in, confirming we had sent the email. The plan had been executed flawlessly. There was a sense of nervous calm. We had fired our shot. Now we just had to wait and see what the fallout would be. Dave, ever the strategist, advised us to not respond to any calls or emails from work. We are sick, he wrote. We are resting and recovering. We will be available again in 3 days. It was solid advice. Any communication could be used against us. Silence was our shield. Back at the office, the situation was escalating. The VP told our director to get a handle on it now. The director, in full panic mode, called an emergency meeting with Jessica and the head of the legal department. The legal counsel, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened patiently as Jessica laid out her case. Jessica explained her proactive cultural initiative, Gary's microaggression, and the coordinated patriarchal backlash that followed. The lawyer listened, then asked to see the sick leave emails and the relevant section of the employee handbook. After reviewing them, she looked at Jessica with a tired expression. There's nothing we can do, the lawyer said flatly. They've done everything by the book, our book. If you punish them, they will win in court, and the discovery process will make the company look very, very bad. She then turned to our director. Your priority is the Phoenix project. What's the status? He explained that without the team, the project was dead in the water. They couldn't even do damage control because the guys who knew the system were all unreachable. The lawyer sighed. So, the direct result of this HR initiative is a complete work stoppage in a critical department, a missed deadline on a major project, and a potential breach of contract with a key client. Is that an accurate summary? Jessica tried to interject. But the long-term cultural health of the company? The lawyer cut her off. The long-term cultural health of the company depends on us actually having a company, and we won't if we lose our biggest clients. The message was clear. Jessica had gone from being a cultural warrior to a massive financial liability. The VP was briefed on the legal assessment. He was furious. He called Jessica into his office for a one-on-one meeting. Nobody knows for sure what was said in that room. But the story is that he didn't care about her feelings or her ideology. He asked her one simple question. What business outcome were you trying to achieve with this mandatory workshop? She tried to explain about creating a more inclusive environment. He cut her off. I'm asking about a business outcome. Did you expect this to increase productivity, improve code quality, strengthen client relations? She had no answer. Her entire framework was built on social and ideological goals, not business metrics. He then apparently laid out the actual business outcomes she had achieved. a 100% loss of productivity in a key team, a major project failure, and a severe risk to client retention. He told her she had demonstrated a profound lack of judgment. She had treated the company's most valuable technical assets not as partners, but as subjects for a social experiment, and the experiment had failed spectacularly. The second day of our sick leave was quiet. We heard through the grapevine that the workshop had been officially postponed indefinitely. The posters on the walls had been taken down. Our director sent a single, desperate email to the entire team, asking if anyone felt well enough to just log in for an hour to help with the client crisis. Nobody responded. It was a test of our solidarity, and we held the line. We were sick. We were recovering from the stressful and hostile environment that the company's own HR department had created. On the third day, the final shoe dropped. We got a company-wide email from the CEO. It was a short, generic announcement stating that Jessica was no longer with the company. We thank her for her contributions and wish her the best in her future endeavors. The corporate equivalent of being erased from history. The group chat lit up. It wasn't triumphant or boastful. It was just a wave of relief. We had done it. We had stood up to the madness without saying a word. We had won. The next day, we all came back to work. Walking into the office felt surreal. It was like returning to a place after a storm has passed. The air was different. The tension was gone. Jessica's office was empty, the door ajar. We could see a blank desk inside. Our director avoided eye contact with us all morning. He looked humbled, defeated. He didn't mention the project deadline or the client. He just kept to his office. Around noon, he finally came out and walked over to Gary's desk. He spoke in a low voice, but a few of us could overhear. He apologized. He said the situation had gotten out of hand and that it should never have happened. Gary, being the good-natured guy he is, just nodded and said, "Water under the bridge. Let's get this project back on track." And just like that, it was over. We all got to work. The atmosphere was better than it had been in months. There was a new energy in the room, a quiet confidence. We had faced a threat to our team, to our professional dignity, and we had faced it together. The bond between us was stronger than ever. We managed to pull together and finish the critical parts of the project in 2 days of intense, focused work. We salvaged the contract with the client. We proved that we were the professionals we'd always been. After work that Friday, the entire team went out to a local bar. All 20 of us. It wasn't a celebration. It was more like a collective exhale. We sat around a big table, just talking and laughing. We talked about everything except what had happened. We didn't need to. We all knew. We had all been part of it. Towards the end of the night, Dave, the quiet hero of our story, raised his glass. We all went quiet, waiting for him to speak. He just looked around the table at all of us, a small, rare smile on his face. "To sick days," he said. We all laughed and raised our glasses. To sick days. We had been pushed into a corner, accused of being toxic, and targeted for humiliation. They expected us to argue, to get angry, to give them the fight they wanted. But instead, we just chose not to play their game. Jessica wanted us to come to her session and apologize for who we are. Instead, the system she tried to create fell apart, and she was the one who was forced to leave. It was a quiet victory, one not with loud protests or angry words, but with coordinated silence and a perfect understanding of the rules. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just refuse to show up.